I'm going to introduce our penultimate, our second to last author, and that is Evan Bond. Evan Bond is a thriller, suspense, and horror author who loves blending his love of the outdoors with his writing. He is the author of several titles, including his best selling psychological thriller, Echoes of the Past, and his latest collection of horror shorts, Charred Remains. Evan, go ahead and begin whenever you're.
Will do. Thank you so much. So I want to give a little bit of prologue to mine as well. So I'm starting shortly after mine follows a character. Her name is Ada Hunter, and she is in a cat and mouse game in the woods, deep in the woods, with a serial killer. So my story here starts shortly after she has been captured, kidnapped, and cornered, and we'll go here. A dark figure pulled into view, standing over her and blocking out the light from the moonlight streaming through the trees. She couldn't see the man's face, but she didn't need to. It was the same man she had rear-ended on the road. No doubt about it. He was now wearing a black hoodie and gloves with duct tape around the wrists. Something large glinted in his right hand, and Ada's eyes grew wide with fear. Suddenly, her ability to scream flooded back, and she let out an ear-piercing cry for help. The man standing over her laughed and began to scream as loud as he could alongside her. Yes, please, come help, he yelled. Hurry! Their voices echoed in unison through the trees until they drifted away on the wind. There's no help coming, Ada, he said as he held up a plastic card in his left hand. With her vision finally returned, she could see it was her license. There's no escape and no help out here, Ada. Scream all you want. I encourage it, actually. With that, he let out another yell filled with primal rage. Ada's skin began to crawl. I'm sorry I rear-ended you, Ada muttered. I'll pay for the damages, just please. She let her words trail off, unable to finish the sentence. The man let out a laugh and crouched lower, looming over her. I'm not mad about the car. A little paint and she'll be as good as new. Bumper is reinforced anyway, so shouldn't even be much more than a scratch. She's been through this before. Despite the hot, humid air of summer, Ada felt a winter storm roar up in her veins as it traveled all throughout her body. This was clearly not the first time this deranged man had done this. Ada tried to slide her body backward through the dirt to escape the stare of the wild man standing over her. He stood, shook his head, and pressed his boot against her pelvis. She felt intense pressure and feared the bone would crack. And just where do you think you're going? The man said, looking around. In case you hadn't noticed, there isn't much out here. She knew pleading with the man would do her no good. He seemed to want nothing other than the satisfaction of hurting her. Crying and begging would only make things worse for her. Control over his helpless victim. Despite her utter fear, she refused to give it to him. He stared at her for a moment as if waiting for the tears and begging to start. A quiet one, huh? The others always begged, screamed, and cried at this point. You are a fascinating one, I'll give you that. Without warning, the man released his foot and bent down in one swooping motion, picking up Ada by her collar. He flung her into the air with ease, pressing her firmly up against the bark of a tree. One hand gripped around her throat while the other held her by the wrist. Her chest ached and burned for the want of air as her windpipe closed. In desperation, her free arm shot up and flailed around like an injured snake before it finally found its fangs and slashed across her attacker's face. He let out a cry, losing his grip as he stepped back and pressed his hand against his left eye. Ada fell to the ground, gasping for air. You little bitch, the man screamed as he pulled his hand free and checked for blood. There was only a trickle, but Ada was proud. Fuck you, she panted. This only served to enrage her attacker, who delivered a kick to her stomach, sending Ada rolling through the dirt and landing face up. An intense pain stung in her abdomen, but quickly dulled as her adrenaline began to flow. You're gonna beg before the end, I promise you that. The man stepped forward, straddling Ada before dropping on top of her. The most intense fear Ada had ever felt in her life erupted up and down every nerve ending in her body. There was no knowing what this man would do next. Would he continue to assault her? Would it turn sexual? Was he planning to end her life now? These thoughts all flashed through her mind in an instant, nearly overwhelming her. She felt like she would black out and vomit simultaneously. Seething anger burned in his eyes as his hands rose towards her throat. He wrapped his fingers around her neck, squeezing as tightly as he could. Ada's hands lashed out, desperately trying to claw and gouge any sensitive area she could reach, but to no avail. He was able to keep his face just out of her reach. Now, with her vision blurring and lungs burning, her hands probed the forest floor. Her nails dug into the soft earth, clawing and reaching for anything she could use to defend herself. Drool hung from his bottom lip as he squeezed her throat. His own eyes bulged and his skin turned bright red from anger and exertion. Despite the gut-wrenching fear for of her Despite the gut-wrenching fear of her life ending at that very moment, a strange thought flooded through her mind. Not giving in and showing fear seemed to have only made him angrier. She wished she had cried and screamed and fought back more to buy herself some time. As her world began to darken, Ada's hands stretched out, combing the dirt around her for anything she could use in one final attempt to save her life. If she didn't find a way to break free from this man, she would be dead in a matter of seconds. Her left hand probed through the ground and found nothing but a fistful of dirt. The fingers on her right hand dug into the earth, looking for anything hard. She would even take a fallen branch, anything she could use. Her lungs ached for air as her vision began to fade. Desperately, she tried to inhale, but no air could enter. Right before she felt as though she would pass out, her fingers wrapped around something hard buried in the dirt. Without a second thought, she clawed the object free and swung it as hard as she could. It connected with the side of the man's head with a loud crack, and he toppled over on the ground, groaning. Air rushed into her lungs all at once, causing her to gasp for air, coughing as she attempted to stand. The rock she had clawed free was tightly grasped in her hand. She barely noticed it was there as she struggled for air. Despite the fire in her lungs and the cramp forming in her side, Ada raced off into the darkness, panting hard as she ran. Several times she stopped for a few seconds to catch her breath, lean against a tree, or search for a spot to hide. Each and every time, the smallest noise would send her back into a blind panic and on a wild run through the trees. After what seemed like an hour, Ada dropped to her knees behind a tree and wept. Finally, she had caught her breath and felt as though she could move at a faster pace, but she needed to compose herself. Tears rolled down her face. Ada pressed her forehead against the tree, bracing herself. She listened for any sound in the distance of the man following her, but heard nothing. She wished she had smashed his head with the rock until his brains had splashed out over the forest floor. Everything had happened too fast. There was no time to think, only react. At that moment, she realized she was still holding the rock. She readied herself to drop it, but then thought better of it. Having any sort of weapon could prove useful. She leaned back and pulled the object up to her eye level, only to realize something amazing. This was no rock. Caked in dirt, grass, and a little bit of mud was something she could never have expected to pull free from the ground at her moment of absolute necessity. Ada stared at the object in her hand, wondering if it had been sent to her from the heavens in her time of need. Like Arthur finding the Lady of the Lake, who offered him Excaliber, this item was her Excaliber. Laying in her dirt encrusted palm was a revolver.